Greetings. I wanted to correct a mistake that I made in my previous stream with Jay Burden. We were talking about retention problems among Christians, specifically Christians that send their children off to Christian private schools and Christian colleges, and people fall away from the faith. In the midst of my discussion with Jay Burden, I incorrectly identified a revivalist theorist preacher as Charles Spurgeon. What I meant to say was Charles Finney. I did correctly remember that Charles Finney was a Presbyterian of some sort, and that he had founded Oberlin College and was associated with the Second Great Awakening in American history. On several particulars, I did identify Finney, but I mistook him for Charles Spurgeon. They are both called Charles. They just merged in my mind. This is a mistake that I have made previously. I apologize for any perceived disparagement of Spurgeon. That is not what I was talking about. I would like to beg the indulgence of my audience here, specifically the commenters led by the noble Prince of Parma. I want to beg your indulgence on this issue just because it's something that concerns both of us. It concerns us. We are men of faith. I do take it. We want children educated and raised in the faith to retain the faith. I agree. I agree with that proposition. I am acting in good faith here. I don't want to be mistaken for someone who is ill-informed or as a slanderer, neither of which I intended to convey. Certainly not a slanderer. I do want to respect my Protestant brethren on their own terms, to judge them by their own terms, and to keep the disagreements in matters of doctrine respectable. This is something that I do strive for, and it grieves me that I did not succeed in this case. I came off as too flippant, so I wanted to revisit the issue. In the effort of being transparent and explicit here, I wanted to reveal a bit more about myself. I really don't mind anyone knowing. I went to Liberty University. I went there for undergraduate work, and for some graduate work, I was there for a period of time. During my time there, I was friendly, and indeed I lived with seminary students. I lived with several seminary students. Alas, I do look back at that experience and reflect that many of the people that I was associated with no longer call themselves Christians, including the seminary students that I knew, those that imagined that they would have a future in the ministry as clergy or evangelists or something. They did not maintain their Christian faith. That has always disturbed me. While I was in college, even at the time I went to college, I was disassociating myself with my Baptist upbringing. But in the interest of being more rooted and serious about my faith, not in the interests of discarding my Christian faith. I know that members of our sphere can relate to what I'm talking about. At Liberty University, I was the member of the last generation of students that knew the founder, Jerry Falwell Sr., the famous evangelist. I met him several times. I shook his hand several times. He was a remarkable man in that he literally could meet thousands of people, but he tended to remember people's names. I would describe him as very jolly, very sociable. He was gigantic, and he was porkeen, you might say. He was He may have weighed something like 400 pounds at his peak. Perhaps I'm overestimating, but he was gigantic. And it was not flab. This was a man with extraordinary physical strength. He really enjoyed crushing the hands of those who offered them in shaking. And he crushed my hand on a couple of occasions. I was always very impressed by his strength. And he was also a man of incredible endurance. But anyway, while I was there at Liberty, Jerry Falwell was very taken with Rick Warren. Perhaps you remember Rick Warren. Rick Warren was pretty famous for sitting down with Obama and McCain when Obama and McCain were in the presidential race. He was called, perhaps by Time magazine or some other major publication, he was called America's pastor. He was the pastor of a non-denominational church in California. I think it was called Saddleback Church. And he had written a number of popular books. The most popular of all was The Purpose-Driven Life, which came out while I was a student. Jerry Falwell ended up doing some administratively fishy things in relation to Rick Warren. He canceled classes for a week and sent us all to a Rick Warren seminar. He had invited Rick Warren to the campus. Rick Warren had also written a book called The Purpose-Driven Church. Rick Warren's staff from Saddleback Church came to my school and ran a week-long church growth seminar for which Jerry Falwell canceled classes. He also purchased a copy of The Purpose-Driven Life for every single student. He told us that he was purchasing these books for us, that this was like a gift or something, but it actually came out of school funds, so we did pay for them. That came out later on, and it caused something of a scandal. But that all aside, I mean, Liberty University is perhaps better known now for administrative scandals, unfortunately. These people were nouveau riche. They did not know how to handle money and power. They had no experience of it. Put it aside for that. I'm certainly willing to give them a little bit of a pass there, in that they're nouveau riche at least. But Jerry Falwell and Rick Warren spoke to us for a week about church growth tactics. And this was in place of my academic curriculum. This was in place of my college classes. I sat on uncomfortable metal folding chairs for a whole week. And I remember I took the Chronicles of Narnia and Augustine's Confessions with me off of my shelf and read them during that week. But I must also claim that I was paying a certain amount of attention. One of the things that we came away with was instruction about Charles Finney. This is my connection here. Both Jerry Falwell and Rick Warren expressed great admiration for Charles Finney and his tactics in revivalism. And something that struck me particularly was Rick Warren talking about hymn singing in Baptist churches and recommending that the traditional part of the congregation be purposefully sidelined and ignored. He said that reforming the church to create church growth was far more important, to make the church what he called seeker-friendly, was far more important in the interest of just getting people in the door, that it was worthwhile to sacrifice the traditional part of the congregation, the initiated part of the congregation. Rick Warren specifically said these people tend to be older. It's worth alienating the elderly. It's worth alienating the mature Christians in the congregation in order to make the service appeal to the broadest number possible, to the largest common denominator. At the time, I was extremely upset about that. And I was really reacting to that. I was already reacting to that before I got to Liberty, but hearing it from the movers and shakers themselves and hearing a contemporary Baptist giant like Jerry Falwell endorsing that strategy was one of the things that was really animating me at the time. I knew that I was still a Christian, but I was certainly moving in some kind of high church direction at the time. I wanted to be an Anglican, an old school Anglican, the kinds that still believed in the virgin birth and the resurrection, I must designate. I liked the Book of Common Prayer. I had discovered it my first year of college, before I went to Liberty, by the way. I was extremely upset about this focus on rooting out everything in the church, rooting out everything in Protestant evangelical churches to accommodate those who were not even Christians. Now, this was justified explicitly on the grounds of the altar call, and I would like to be very clear on this. This was in my understanding, this was the connection to Charles Finney. Charles Finney was adamant that it was the single emotional choice that was made in a revival meeting that determined the Christianity of his converts, not what happened afterwards. This is one of the things that typified his ministry. Now, I'm not saying this I'm not trying to slander Finney. I'm trying to say that there is a connection here. All right? Finney believed something that modern Baptists and evangelicals believe. Certainly my Baptists believed this. This is what my immediate family believes. I'm no longer a Baptist, but I would like, just dispassionately, I would like to insist this is something that I've heard them say my entire life, and I disagree with this point. The point is they believe that salvation is reducible to a single choice, a single emotional experience. I would like to emphasize this once again. From the Protestant circles that I came from, which are very low church, Southern Baptist circles. This is all related to Jerry Falwell's movement, whatever is left of it at this point. These Baptists had a tradition, and still have a tradition, in which those to be received into the church, either for baptism or membership, must first demonstrate that they have a salvation experience that they can identify in a single moment in their lives. Now, I realize not all Protestants believe this. All right? Presbyterian would not ask for such a thing. A Lutheran would not ask for such a thing. I know that. And I am not trying to disparage Lutherans or Presbyterians in relating this information. All right? I'm speaking from where I came from, and also specifically what I was rejecting as faulty and insufficient. I'm not talking from a place of ignorance on the subject. This is something that I continue to encounter as a mature adult, 10 years past my conversion and reception into the Orthodox Church. I still do encounter this in the Baptist circles that I frequently do enter, and I attend Baptist services with my family when I am with my family, and this is the way that they speak of their faith and practice. I know in my early adulthood I was strongly relating this to what I had learned about the teachings of Charles Finney. I realized that it may indeed go further back than that, and I am aware Finney was not a Baptist. I did not think he was. Previously, I did say correctly he was a Presbyterian, the man that I was calling to mind. And that is Charles Finney. He was some sort of Presbyterian. I do not think that he has much in common with the Presbyterians I know today. Anyway, I'm interested in tracing the origin of this seeker-friendly church movement that certainly weakened the Christians that I knew in my college generation. In my opinion, this was a significant factor in many of my classmates falling away from the faith. I was already rejecting that. I was raised in a hymn-singing church for various reasons. I did not stay at a hymn-singing church, but it was not as if my family had a choice about that. We would have much preferred that. We would have been much happier with that. We had to move across the country, and we could not stay in the sort of church that suited us. When we moved, we could not find hymn-singing Baptist churches anymore. And I realized that my religious tradition was very parochial. It was specific to one particular place in the country. In particular, and this is an interesting point, it was related to churches associated with Bob Jones University. And their clergy tended to come out of Bob Jones University, not Liberty University. All right, so this is a different variety of Baptist that I did come from. I did not come from a Jerry Falwell Baptist church. I went to Jerry Falwell's school. There's a difference. But anyway, I did want to give one more factor in my knowledge of Baptists and the particular sort of Baptists that I did come from. Another difference between my Baptists of my upbringing, my family connections, and Jerry Falwell's Baptists was a belief called landmarkism. My immediate family are landmark Baptists. Now, this is a particular variety. You may know something about Bob Jones University. I have a genuine respect for them. I would like to emphasize in that they are low church Protestants who are taking their tradition very seriously. And they do not mind being seen as wacky by the modern world. That certainly strengthens them. These are people that are accustomed to a kind of dismissal and even a kind of persecution. I respect that about them. You may respect Amish people for living, radically differently than the prevailing way in modern times, wearing their beards and dressing the way they do and refusing to use electricity and such. There is something very honorable about such a rebellion in modern times, and they connect it very strongly to their faith, right? That is what gives them the strength to live the way they do. That you can say similar things about the Bob Jones crowd. Anyway, to conclude, landmarkism is a particular Baptist belief. My understanding is that this is a very small group of Baptists, though you can find churches on the map that identify themselves as landmark Baptist churches in the name of the church itself. In my experience, this was something that members of Baptist churches would entertain and would teach to their own families. But it was not something they necessarily shared with the pastor or the convention. You must understand, Baptist churches are very decentralized, and there is a broad variety of beliefs in any given congregation. There is no central authority. There is no standard catechism that Baptists all use. There is a broad variety of beliefs and practices among Baptists. That is one of their characteristic things, and that's something that has made them very resilient to theological corruptions, modernist corruptions. Baptists are well known for taking the fundamentalist side in the fundamentalist modernist war in the seminaries of America. And they did win over their seminaries and kicked out a lot of modernist academics out of their seminaries. At the same time, other mainline Protestant denomination seminaries were being taken over by modernism and the higher criticism and things of that nature. The Baptists were able to preserve a traditional theology, traditional historiography in their seminaries, and that gave them a unique strength. The decentralized character of Baptists is also a kind of unique strength that they have in modern times, in my opinion. But the landmarkers believe something really very incredible, and I found this a really extraordinary thing once I understood the magnitude of the claim after I went to college and became a history major. The landmarkers say that all of church history is a giant conspiracy against Baptist doctrine. The landmarkers say the Arians were really Baptists. The landmarkers say the Nestorians were really Baptists. They claim that the Albigensians were really Baptists. They claim the Cathars were Baptists. And they also claim that all historical evidence to the contrary is a forgery. So this is an incredible conspiracy theory, and it is a variety of Baptist belief. Now, I'd like once more to emphasize that is not what most Baptists believe. This is a fringe group even among Baptists. But once again, I would like to admit this is where I came from. Now, I am not trying to I'm not trying to hate on those that confess this as their faith. It is very hard to maintain faith in the modern world. And I want faith in the modern world, even if it is in the kaleidoscope of denominations that we have here in the United States. I would much rather these churches flourish and have their own contributions to make. I don't want all their children falling away from their proper and just belief in Jesus. So, in conclusion, I realize I may have sounded dismissive. I certainly hope I did not sound slanderous. I did not want to come across that way. I have a serious interest in the subject. I have paid attention in spite of trying to read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe while Rick Warren droned on and on for hours and hours. I did pay attention. I did take interest to some degree, and can still recall things that were said then. They made an impression on me. Our common interest in this conversation is that we identify where things have gone wrong as far as preserving the faith of the young and preserving faith in an educational environment. in that we share an interest. Most of my students are low church Protestants in my high school setting, and I am committed to encouraging their faith where they are. I am not trying to dissuade them from their faith. I'm trying to make them better Baptists, better non-denominational Christians. It certainly would be easier to teach at a parochial school where I could teach from the position of church authority. But I don't have that. Maybe preferable to what I'm doing now, but I'm not desiring to change my career, move to another institution. And I have a sincere interest in this subject. I'm not trying to mock anyone. So with that, I will conclude. I've gone on far too long, but best wishes to all of you. Once again, I'm a bit mortified that I mistook Spurgeon for Finney. It was Charles Finney, not Charles Spurgeon, and I apologize to anyone who felt like I was disparaging Spurgeon. Spurgeon, to my knowledge, has said and done nothing to deserve my disparagement. But I take issue with Finney, and it is a serious matter. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you very much. Good night.